So it's good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks so much for chatting with me and yeah, just taking the time to chat a bit more about what you do and yeah, I guess I just really wanted to find out a bit more in detail of kind of how you've gotten to where you are today. And I know you mentioned a little bit over Insta, the build up to where you are, but yeah, I just wanted to go into
Hmm.
a little bit more depth and find out a bit more about yeah, how you like to operate and your principles behind, your coaching and things like that.
Yeah, cool. How far back do I start? All the way?
Yeah, go like for whatever's convenient for you.
Cool. How much time do we have in total? I mean, for the call.
Do you, I don't mind. Do you, half an hour?
Cool.
Is that good for you?
I've got time just to get an idea. Yeah, that's good. So I always played sports as a kid. Played soccer
Mhm.
for quite a few years. Did some martial arts. Nothing crazy. Judo, karate, some kung fu as well for about a year, and then I moved into rugby. Played rugby from 17 to 22, 23. Played here in Switzerland at so it's amateur level. Played in the first league here. I had one selection with the national team, the senior national team. Before that, I did U20 and U21, which has nothing to do with the level that you would see in Australia or any other big rugby nations. So
Mhm.
it's quite a low level of competition, but it was fun evolving with the national team anyway. And then I went to Canada, or I traveled a little bit. I actually came to Australia for 6 months and moved around quite a bit: Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, down to southwest coast in a little place called Denmark, back up to Brisbane, Surfers Paradise. So kind of went around. Came back to Switzerland. Still didn't want to be here. I left for Canada, where I met my wife actually at the rugby club at a fundraiser night for the rugby club that I found there shortly after arriving.
Mhm.
And so I started working there, and it wasn't until I was painting houses. I was doing residential painting, and at that time I was training for Olympic weightlifting. I'd found CrossFit the year prior, and CrossFit in and of itself, I really liked the whole everything that it brought to the table, but I was never interested in competing in the sport as such. So, but weightlifting did interest me quite a bit. So I did that for a couple of years. Competed at the provincial level in BC in Vancouver. I was, and then while I was doing this, I was obviously training quite a bit, spending a lot of time in the gym every week, and realized my wife said that Sean, all the studying that you do on the side, I was reading a lot of books and listening to podcasts all day when I was painting, all the fitness, all the strength and conditioning stuff.
Mhm.
And she said, "Hey, you should probably start getting paid for all the work you're doing on the sides." And so I followed her advice. I quit my job. I bought the NSCA book and challenged the exam a couple months later, and then started coaching.
And how old was
At the
sorry, Buddy?
How old was I then?
Yeah.
I was about 7 years ago, so right around 23, 24. And at the start, well, it's you pass the exam, you get the certification, you can get insurance, you can coach now, and now it's like, okay, so now what? Didn't realize that there was the whole entrepreneurial part that wasn't mentioned in the book anywhere. Obviously, you can work for other gyms and stuff. Nobody talks about the communication aspect of coaching either when you learn all that stuff. And so those were, I mean, I've always been pretty outgoing and had a good communication skills to begin with, I would say, which I think was a big advantage coming into the field. Started out coaching friends for free,
Mhm.
and I just said, I'll coach you for a while, and if you get good results, if you'll leave me a review, then that'll be great. And that's how I started. So I did quite a bit of that at the beginning for 4 to 6 months, I would say. Most of my clients were just friends or acquaintances, just to gain experience. And started working for a couple gyms around town, and slowly but surely built up my own client base on the side. And about 3 or 4 years in, I was able to go full time on my own business and have work only for myself and not for someone else on the side. So that was good. Did that for a couple years. So in Vancouver, mostly PT, personal training, and I did a little bit of strength and conditioning with the Burnaby team that I had played for previously. Um, and then we decided, actually, it was my wife's idea to come back and live here in Switzerland, where I had grown up, which we did a year and a half ago now. So moved back here. It took a little while to get back to coaching full time here, obviously, because I didn't have the client base here that I had there. But I had the upper hand in terms of the network that I already had, since I'd spent 20 plus years of my life here. All my friends, the rugby club, which I went back to as a physical preparation coach. So I now manage all the physical prep for the Nyon Rugby team, for mainly for the seniors, but I'm also available for the women's team, all the juniors, U16, U18, as well as the veteran team. And so started. It took me about a year to get back on my feet here. I had a side job for about 8 months. And now I'm back to coaching full time. So personal training with some private clients, some online training as well. I write programs and follow up and do all the coaching remotely for people that are not necessarily in the area or can't necessarily afford one-to-one coaching. So I actually work with some of the guys on the team who want more than just the sessions that I do, as part of the team training, because we only have 2 trainings a week, Tuesday and Thursday evening, and so it's not a lot of time to work with the guys. So obviously, some want to put in the extra work, and I work with them on the side. And I've also started last year helping the Swiss Academy, so all the U16 through U20 juniors. There's 2 academies in Switzerland, 2 gathering places, let's say. There's one here in Nyon and there's one in Zurich that's farther up to the center of the country. And so I'm in charge of planning all the physical prep for both. And I'm physically on location in Nyon when those events happen. There's a gathering every once a week, usually in season, like on the Monday evening. All the kids from the area come down and there's a training together, which is more individually oriented. It's more kind of individual skills and individual physical performance because they don't necessarily all play with the same age group. But it's an interesting dynamic and a fun change of pace from working with the seniors. You have to work slightly differently to keep the youngsters interested.
For sure. Did you like when you started out with the rugby teams, did you approach them like when you got back and started living back in Switzerland?
It was my goal to come back and do this. And I know the president, the current president of the club, I used to play with him on the field years ago when I was in Nyon, and he mentioned an interest of having me come on as a staff as well. So that kind of just worked out really well. And since then I've been kind of diving deep into all things rugby physical preparation, which has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So I guess when you started out in Vancouver, you said it took you about 3 to 4 years before you were able to break out on your own. And I was just wondering, like, I guess at what point did you decide that, you'd built up enough and then went out on your own to go full time? Like, did you have to, you were with the gyms and you were sort of like working with the gyms and you had some of your own clients on the side. So you're kind of having your own business, but not, and then just went full time into your own business? Or was it just like from the gym straight into your own clients?
I always had my own clients on the side to some extent. I had a couple opportunities where gyms wanted to hire me full time, and I would have had to let go of my business. I decided against it. I didn't want to let it go. It's something that I guess I just felt like I needed to keep it and that it was important to me. I didn't want to work for someone else full time. I was okay doing it in the meantime just to get to where I wanted to be in terms of independence as an entrepreneur. But I wouldn't have let that go. So I always had my clients on the side, and I remember one of the transitions that I made. It was the gym that I was working for was asking me to be available for a certain number of hours every week. I think it was something like 25 hours. I had to just be there at the gym available if there was clients coming in, or there was no drop-in. So it was all like personal training, group coaching as well. But I had to be there for that many hours. And then I only coached a few hours out of the week. I think I had maybe 6 or 7 group classes that I was coaching, and then maybe a couple PT clients. really not much over the week, and that was a lot of hours. And I remember just quickly doing the math. I had a meeting one day with the manager after the first couple months, I believe. And before going in, my wife and I just did the math, and I was like, 25 hours a week. I'm getting paid for 7 of those, and I'm not getting paid a lot. And all I need is like a couple private clients of my own on the side to make up for that loss of money if
Yeah,
I quit. And so I quit. I just wrote the letter and went in with it. And I said, before we get into anything, here's my letter.
yeah,
Um, After that, I believe I still worked for another gym for a little while, but it was just a better setup. I had more free time, and it allowed me to do what I wanted to do on the side. But there was never a smooth transition between the two. I think it was always a bit of a leap of faith,
yeah,
in hindsight, it's a very exciting moment when you go from a very safe place to like, I'm just jumping and I'm
yeah.
gonna kind of grow my wings as I fall down, kind of thing. But I actually really enjoyed those moments because it was kind of those big steps that got me closer to where I wanted to be and where I am today.
Yeah, and I think that like the way you like I think that's awesome that you just took the leap of faith and went all in, which is like obviously ideally as an entrepreneur that's sort of what you want to do. But I guess did you find that you like had to sort of know your numbers in terms of like yes there is an element of income in it and you kind of have to know that I have to have a certain amount of clients to be able to whether it's break even or to be able to obviously live this lifestyle that I want to live. Was that a big thing, like in terms of getting from the point of like making enough in the business, but then making enough to live your ideal lifestyle?
Yeah, I was lucky that my wife was working full time, so I was definitely not the main breadwinner of the house at that point in time,
Yeah.
and so I don't think I could have got gotten to where I got to as fast without her being there.
Mm.
If I was just me on my own, it probably would have taken me a little bit longer because I would have had uh, I would have needed more money coming in to be able to pay all the bills and get all that stuff sorted out. We didn't have a grandiose lifestyle or anything like that, but it just made sense from a times perspective as well for me to maybe have a bit more time at home as well to help Lynn, my wife. And so it just made sense from that standpoint. But it's true that if you're really just by yourself
Mm.
working a full-time job and then you're trying to transition into coaching, I think that's a pretty big jump, which I haven't had to make, but I can imagine that it would be a much bigger jump than the one that I did.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm kind of in a similar situation to you. However, I'm at that point where I've got a full-time business and I'm running a full-time coaching business at the moment, but it's not quite enough to be able to do as much as I want to do within the business, like my end business goals and being able to help as many runners and endurance athletes as I can. Um, and I'm sort of at that point where I need to find a bit more efficiency and be able to grow my business and a little bit more so that I can actually run my retreats and coaching workshops overseas and I can help more people and have the online platform and whatnot. But it's just so hard as a solo coach doing all the things in the business. And um,
Mhm.
I just thought it'd be interesting to see how you whether you had any hardship or struggle to kind of transition to a certain amount of clients or coaching per week for I guess your ideal outcome, and obviously still being able to keep the balance but be able to live your ideal lifestyle in the process. So
Yeah, I think for me now, and I didn't necessarily have that point of view before, but for me now, it's content is a huge part of what I do and how I operate. Because for me, it's like legacy. It's a base of information that a database of information uh, that I build up over time, and that is always it's evergreen. I don't do a lot of like news topics and stuff like that. I always try to put out valuable information that's gonna help you, whether you see it now or in maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years if things haven't changed too much. So I think in that regard, that's a huge part of what I'm doing now. Essentially, I coach And then all the hours in the day where I'm not coaching, I create as much content as I can. And it doesn't pay off today, it doesn't pay off tomorrow, but I started that process about 6 months ago, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first 4 months, 5 months, didn't see much.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last couple months alone, I've seen tremendous returns. Again, not financial yet,
Yeah.
but the number of opportunities that I'm having, the connections that I'm making in the industry, the potential for future opportunities as well is just tremendous. And so I can only imagine what it's going to be like in a couple years once all that, comes to fruition, kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm using as it's not a system, it's just, I guess, a strategy to move forward and to get to where I want to be and be able to just live the life that I want to live.
You caught my ear there for a second about systems and things like that. I kind of want to pick your brain around your systems and, I guess, time blocking throughout the day. This is something that I personally really struggle with, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
holding me back from being able to transition into probably where you're at now and obviously where we're both trying to head. I'm doing the same stuff as you. I'm probably doing like 50% content stuff at the moment, but I'm finding it really hard. Like, I'm not so efficient at content making. I feel like I could learn a thing or two out of from your books in content making and just, the processes and things like that. That's one side of the equation. But the other thing is I'm really struggling with, having say 10, 15 clients that you online program for every week on a weekly basis. And, you're doing your check-ins and you're doing 60-minute consults via Zoom. And then you've got online classes that you run of an evening, and there's all these different things. And then you're trying to produce the content as well to obviously, maximize, obviously maybe be able to obviously get more clients at the end of the day, but also just to build the community and the connection. And, and so I guess I wanted to see what your systems were in terms of, is that something that you are always working on, or you're pretty good at time blocking throughout the day?
I'm not great at it, and my wife will be the first to tell you that. I think I'm getting better, and just prioritizing and having a to-do list. I use Trello, which is a
Yeah.
I guess a prior. Yeah, that's my current task list is here, and that's all the things that I have to do. Some with deadlines, some just I think something up and I have to write it down. Like, my kid has a lot of allergies, and we were at the school, like I mentioned previously, and so I have to send something to the teacher, and so I just wrote it up in there so I don't forget, because I have so many things going on. If I don't write it down, I
That's
forget.
amazing. You're raising a kid and you've got a family and you're doing full-time coaching and you're producing all this amazing content. Like, it's just, I thought I was, I was doing a heap, but I don't have a kid, so I can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I honestly, I love it. I love it. And I think, I mean, it sounds corny, but the process is the game, right? So we always have that end goal in mind, but we're always disappointed when we get to it, or there's always the next thing. So I think just enjoying the process as such, I think is important. And I'm coming to realize this more and more. And so trying to take advantage of, I have a little bit of time in the morning. On Wednesday, we went for lunch with my wife, just as a little date. And it's nothing crazy, but it was, something. And we can afford to do that because of what we've built so far. So in terms of systems, and that's forever evolving, I guess. But for my online clients, for example, I've built a spreadsheet on Google Sheets, which I share with my client. And so I can program in it, and they can then log all their training in it as well. So we both have eyes on it. It's accessible from phone, computer, so it's pretty easy in that regard. Over the years, I've built up many different resources around that. For example, all the database of exercises that I've filmed over the years to help with my clients when I program. I think I got to be close to 1,000 now that I've filmed that are on my YouTube. And I've actually, yeah, so I put it all on YouTube, and then what I did is I created a database on another Google Sheets, and then I was able through some spreadsheet wizardry that I didn't invent it. I just looked it up on YouTube, but I'm able to essentially pull from the database into my client sheets, which helps me program. For example, I picked that I want to put like a.
Sorry.
I'll send you.
You got
I'll
me.
send you this. I'll send you the spreadsheet. And so I pick, for example, like squat pattern, and then all the squat variations that I've filmed are there, and I click,
Yeah.
auto populates the link to the video. And
Uh-huh.
so I don't have to I don't have to do a whole bunch of copy paste. I make my program. What I usually do is I program in 4-week blocks, and I'll write 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
then I'll check in to see what they filled out, and then I'll, based on the information, then I'll program the other two. So I'll usually work like that. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but that's kind of my overall system. I built in a tracking calendar for them to log their training days in,
Yeah.
so that they can write down what they did when, which gives them a visual as well. And like, this month I trained like 10 or 15 or 20 days out of the month, with some colors and stuff. So I'll send you all that
I was
afterwards.
going to say,
I
this
don't
is
mind.
like, I knew there was a reason why I came across your profile on Instagram, and now we're talking. I'm like, this
The
is just,
spreadsheet. It's all about the spreadsheet.
oh, well, it's like the missing link. It's like, that's what's been holding me back. I've been like, how can I systemize this? I've got about, I've probably not as many videos as you on YouTube at the moment, but some are private, a lot of them are public.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and I've got a Google Photos album of videos as well. And then I've got all these other, spreadsheets of obviously previous clients' programs. And, I don't have templates and whatnot. So I kind of program from scratch. So I'm just taking, hours and hours to, when the process could be a lot quicker, and you could still be providing just as much value. You have a system, right? And so anyway, I find that really exciting, and sounds like the way you've done it is spot on. Like it's, and it's done in Google Sheets. Like, I mean, that's, it's workable, it's simple.
Yeah, because I did use some online training apps, I guess, or coaching apps in the past, and I tried probably 4 or 5 of them over the years. But every time I tried to transition to one, there was always some functionalities that were missing that I needed, and that I wanted for my clients and for me. And so I always went back to my spreadsheet and like revamped my spreadsheet or improved it, uh, using sometimes some of the ideas that were on the other apps. And I've never found the perfect thing that works for me. And again, I've got, so they have their training sheet, and then there's a sheet where they can track their body weight over time that graphs it out for them. I have one where at the beginning, for example, now when I get a new client on, I have a checklist as one of the sheets, which is the first one actually that they see. And there's all the steps that they need to go through in order to get started. Like, here's how you make the payment, fill out your goals on this sheet, fill out your body measurements here, take your pictures, put them in a folder, fill out the training schedule sheet that I have to tell me which days you're available for how much time. Do you have access to gym? Do you have access to just outdoors? Are you at home? What equipment do you have in each place? So that's all things that I've built over time, so that now I literally don't have to do anything. I just get their sheet ready, I copy my kind of my base one, my new client sheet. I just make a copy, rename it, put their name on it, send them the link, and then that takes care of it. And then they go through the process. They update me when they've done like the first 8 steps or whatever, and then we can go from there, discuss what we're going to assess in terms of tests or measurements, stuff like that, and then I program. So that's been tremendous in helping me. I also, you talked about check-ins, so I set my Thursday morning and my Sunday morning as check-ins, which are very quick. I just literally send them a voice message or a text on WhatsApp. On the Thursday, I ask them for a little update on how their week is going. What have you done so far? What are you doing the rest of the week? I also ask my clients to plan their own training week according to their availabilities. So the program that I built is based on how much time they have, obviously, because you have a family, you have a job, busy job, sports on the side, plus you want to train, like it doesn't leave a lot of time. So I asked them to tell me when they can train and how long, or for how long. And then based on that, I plan as many sessions as we can or as they need. And then it's their job on the Sunday when I text them again to tell me what their plan is for the upcoming week, given their own schedule, so that there's a part of giving them responsibility to find the time to do it. And even though it's not always going to be perfect because we're not all pro athletes, that way they learn the process of just a reflection of, okay, when should I train? When can I train?
Yeah.
Can I do this on back-to-back days? I
Yes.
only have half an hour instead of 45. Should I shorten? How do I shorten? Do I take out a set? Do I take out a block? Do I take out, So, and I try to get my clients to reflect on that as much as possible so that they have as much ownership of the program as possible. And that it's not just me telling them what to do all the time.
I think that's so important.
Sorry?
I think that's so important because, like I have a lot of non-professional triathletes who, sometimes like whether it's discipline or motivation drops or like at the moment we're in COVID and, there's not as many short-term goals to focus on in terms of racing and events and things like that. So if motivation drops and, they're looking at their training schedule for the week and the sessions that I've set them, sometimes they just, they'll miss like a lot of days because maybe, and I think it's a big thing as you just mentioned, that they need to take a little bit more accountability and set the days for themselves. I mean, it's a little bit different to, I guess, straight S&C program for the week if they're doing swim, bike, run and strength. But even if I had like that basic schedule, this is what I would set for you, but there's leeway in it and you can swap it around and just communicate with me that this is how I want to set it out based on my time and schedule and things like that. And then when you've got that communication line open, I think, they're going to be so much more motivated or disciplined more so than motivated to be able to actually stick to a plan, the plan, but in their own way. So.
Yeah, that's it. And the calendar that I mentioned previously, you can, on the different days of the week, we can write down what you're going to do for the upcoming week. You can tick, there's a little drop down on each day and you can tick that you've scheduled it. And then when you've completed it, you just change the drop down to completed. And now the box turns green. So now you have, and the more green you have on your calendar, it looks like you've done a lot of stuff. So they're little things, but I find those really, really helpful. And my clients have mentioned that multiple times, that the calendar is really, really helpful in that regard, because again, it just keeps them accountable, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I have to be there, but I'm not on their heels all the time for them to do it. And some people don't fill it out, and I still tell them to fill it out. If they decide not to, when down the line they come back, and I don't want it to sound like an insurance policy for myself. That's not what it's for, but I give as much as I can from my end. If they don't do their part and they come back to me after 2 months and they tell me, well, I didn't reach my goals, I didn't get what I wanted out of it.
Yeah.
And we can look back and be like, okay, so how much have you done? Well, I don't know. Okay. So did you track like we agreed to? Well, no, I didn't. Okay. So there's a disconnect here, and we can dig farther. And obviously, like I said, the goal is not for me to point the finger at my client and say you didn't do what you were supposed to do. It's to find how can we move forward, how can we make that work, and also not being too comfortable with people not responding to me. If somebody doesn't answer my check-ins and isn't sending me videos like I asked them to, that's another thing in the program. Certain boxes, I just make them yellow, which means send me a video. So on week 1, they're sending me a video of their back squat. Maybe week 2, bench press. I'm just, random words to fill the gaps here. But essentially, if they follow the program and they want to do it well, they know when to send me what. And then I give them feedback on what they send me. So for somebody who's actually following the program, I'm in contact with them, maybe not daily, but at least 4 times, 5 times a week. So which keeps that, and that's the hardest thing I found in the past when I was not going through that process, was keeping the line of communication open when you're not physically with the person was the hardest thing. But through this, I force myself to, or I just do what I set out to do, which is contact them twice a week at the minimum. Plus, if they send me videos of their training sessions, I give them feedback. Sometimes it's extensive because it's necessary. Sometimes it's just, wow, this looks really good. Keep on going. It doesn't always have to be super in depth, but at least there is communication. And that's, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think, like if you've got a client that, like you said, doesn't adhere to what you've asked and they're not tracking, and you've asked them a few times, like, can you, update the tracker, or, so I can actually provide the most benefit to you, blah, blah, blah. How would you go about that? Because now that I'm starting to go, I've got a few international clients. I've always been locally based. But now I have international clients that I don't know as well. and maybe we just don't, I guess it's very different from knowing, your local clients in person. But even so, like, how would you go about that? Like that, having people that don't, but they still want to stay coaching with you, and they feel like they're improving, but they're not tracking and things like that. And you feel like as a coach, you can't give, everything that you could be giving them.
I think it's okay. I think as long as they're doing the work and they're seeing the results and they're moving forward and they're happy with the interaction and the service that I'm providing, that's the most important thing. Even if they don't, I think I have fairly high standards in all things. And so if they can't meet me there all the time, I think that's okay.
What about if they're not
As
doing?
long as they're, sorry?
What about if they're not doing the work? Like,
Then
very inconsistent.
then I'm going to have a conversation with them. I'm going to be like, is this worth it for you? You
Yes.
know, is it worth it for me? Because I'm spending time following up for you and all those things. Give me one sec. I got a bit of reverb in my mic.
That's
I'm
all.
just going to disconnect and come back.
Still gotcha.
Yeah. Am I good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, is it worth it? That's really the question. And I'll message them. I'll send them a voice message and I'll be like, hey, you haven't, sent me any videos or filled out the calendar for a couple months now. Do you want to continue? Like, are we still on? Are you getting something out of this? Because I don't want to waste your money and I don't want to waste my time because I could be spending it, producing content or something. So I'm less afraid of being straight with them and just asking them, hey, are you still interested?
Yeah.
Because again, it is, they're paying me and I could just sit back and be like, well, they're paying me for 6 months. So I'm just going to let them do that and not do the work. But it's
Yeah.
also professionally for me, it's not the right thing to do that. Try to do the right thing when you can is really what I try to live by, which I don't always, but I think, as someone that I respect a lot says, doing the right thing is always the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think the right thing to do in that case is to just ask them, like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
And I guess do
you have problems? Do we need to pause for a month, or are you just?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I guess I have had that conversation, and they're like, yes, like, all right, I understand, and I've sort of been off the bandwagon, but I'm really keen to keep going. But it's like, how many times over do you need to have the conversation? And they say, yeah, I'll fill out the training schedule, I'll do the sessions, and then it doesn't happen, and then you keep checking in with them, but it's like, how many times do you have the conversation with them? It's just a tough one, I find, if they're they've yeah.
I think you have to go on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
I have one client that I've been working with for a year now, and there was a period of 2 or 3 months where there wasn't much communication, but I knew that she was going through a hard period, a hard phase, and I just kept on checking in, like I said that I would. Thursdays I send her a voice message, Sunday I sent her a little text, and she told me afterwards, it was really, really helpful to have you, to knowing that somebody was there, and for her, she just needed to get through what she was going through, and that's fine. We all have our lives to deal with, and we can't always be 100% in our training. But she did mention that even though she wasn't responding, she really appreciated the fact that I was always there, and that she didn't want to stop because it meant a lot to her, and it brought her a lot, not only physically but mentally as well. And so with a client like that, I'm gonna keep going. And I know that if I don't get a response back for a couple of weeks, it's not because she's just willfully disregarding what I'm trying to do. It's she just has her way of functioning, and this is the way. And so I think it really has to be on a case by case basis.
Definitely. And I think if they're a really busy, they have a very busy lifestyle, and they've got crazy work hours, and if whether they're a lawyer or a barrister or whatever they might be,
Mhm.
you've kind of got to adapt to them as much as possible around sort of what they're doing and not doing, and whatnot. So, but yeah, it's just interesting because you go from coaching people within your local community, and then you're coaching people that have different cultural backgrounds and people from all over the world that I guess just think and work a bit different. And you kind of got to educate them, you know, even more so, and just like you say, keep the communication lines open. But yeah, I guess just switching up the questions for a second. I just wanted to, I know I'll be conscious of both yours and mine time wise, but just wanted to ask you.
I got time. Don't worry about mine.
Awesome. I just wanted to ask you about your coaching on the field and whatnot. Like, how do you like to program for your athletes as a team?
Always start from the end goal. So always start from when the season starts. In that case, for preseason, I do a lot of work in the preseason. I don't do as much in season with the guys simply because of time constraints.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of time available to work with them in the preseason, which we're going through now. So just work back from the first game. That's the first thing. So first game is the 12th of September. We started 21st of July, and so that gives me my time frame on how I'm going to progress things. Then just know your sport really well. I think is the maybe if not the second, the most important thing is understand the sport that you're coaching and that you're programming for, because just using protocols that have been used for 10 years or 20 years is not good enough. There's a lot of flashy things all around, and there's a lot of old things that people do with no good reason whatsoever. And so I think we really need to reverse engineer the sport, and then so study time motion analysis of the sport to determine what kind of efforts they're going to are they going to have to be doing, what are the KPIs of performance in the sport, how do most of the tries get scored in the case of rugby. For example, the tries don't get scored through a jog. People are going to be sprinting, and so any preparation that doesn't include some aspect of sprinting or has sprinting as the end goal, for me, is incomplete. And so if for me, I broke it down for the level that I play at or the coach at. I try to make it as simple as possible, not only for me, but also to try and help coaches around here do a better job of it, try to structure it better, because there is that kind of bang your head against the wall mentality in rugby of, if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't work kind of thing,
Yeah.
which I'm trying to change for something a little bit more maybe efficient, in the sense that if we can use half the work to get the same outcome, then why wouldn't we? Which is not to say that I'm trying to be, minimal effective dose on everything, because I think that's not, it sounds great on paper, but it's a bit of a flawed concept, because how low do you at some point you gotta load your athletes if you want them to, to get faster, to get stronger, to get more endurant. But so what I did is I just broke down rugby into three main, from a physical standpoint. I've got speed, I've got endurance as a general term, and then combat, which are the three kind of main activities that they're going to be doing. They're either going to be running fast or sprinting, or they're going to be recovering on a walk, a jog, or even standing still. And there's going to be combat phases that include a lot of upper body, a lot of one-to-one, whether it's tackling, scrummaging, line out lifts, rucking, all those things. And so I've broken it down, and then I've just used that framework to build a progression of, for example, for the sprints, we started with hill sprints because they're going to be less demanding on the hips, the hamstrings. You're not going to be able to reach the same speeds, so the intensity is de facto going to be lower. Then we go to flat, and then we go to flying sprints. And so that build up over the few weeks of prep allows us to avoid as many injuries as possible, but also get the guys ready for the demands of sprinting. From the endurance perspective, we use something that was popularized back in the track and field days by Charlie Francis, called tempo runs. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea, which essentially is just intervals, but it's at a much lower intensity than the usual intervals that people run in rugby. Time frame different as well, in the sense that we usually start on a work to rest ratio of 1-2, or sometimes even 1-3. And again, the intensity is not super high, and we just build on volume, and obviously over time build on intensity. And at the end, now our conditioning sessions look more like rugby. Like they're doing some wrestling for 10 seconds, then they're jogging, then they're resting. Then they're doing a sprint of 30 meters, and they're resting. Then they're just doing a long, nice 70% run, then they're resting. Or they're doing a down and up, or they're doing a 5 meter shuttle. So as we progress, we get closer and closer to the game. And then on the combat side of things, which something that I hadn't done last year, my first year with the team, is getting them ready for contact, which is very important because obviously you can easily hurt yourself, especially because, and people don't realize it when they don't play those sports, those contact sports. Going one-to-one versus someone has nothing to do with like lifting a barbell in the gym.
No.
They're not even remotely close in terms of the demands that they place on the upper body, because you have someone else that you have to constrain or get around or handle or wrestle or grapple with. And so the tension that you have to create, the isometric strength, the different joint angles, all those things can't be replicated in the gym. So we start with a lot of bear crawls, a lot of ground based stuff, as our contact prep, and then we move to wrestling and grappling type drills. So you're still very close to one another. You're not flying into each other like you would directly in a game, but we're getting the body ready for that. And now we're in kind of phase 3, what I call it, which is where all these different qualities come to their term, let's say, or come to fruition, and now they're fully ready to go and play rugby with everything that it entails. Because what I've seen in the past is you do a huge physical prep, pre-season, you flip tires, you do all those crazy, like you run forever, all those things, and then you get to the first game and you're gassed, like you are not ready for the sport. And I think there's a big disconnect there of what you need to actually be good at the sport. And for me, the quality of my work on the preseason is largely determined by how they're going to feel on the first couple games of the season. Does it actually feel like they're ready, or does it feel like they have to relearn their game because what we did had nothing to do with the game of rugby? So that's obviously very specific to the sport that I coach, but I try to take the same approach with any other sports that I coach. I have one of my online clients is he sails. He's in the Swiss national team. He sails in the laser category, which is fairly small boats. And the hiking position that they hold on the boat, I don't know if you're familiar with any of this, but it's very, very specific. You don't really see it anywhere else. And so, for example, fighting a test, if there even is a test that can be designed to actually determine how fit he is for the boat, because again, a squat uses a lot of cycling, like a lot of the rowing community or sailing, community does. A lot of cycling because they need the endurance in the quads, they need the lungs as well. But how do you devise a test that's going to match the demands of his sport and that are actually going to give you interesting information to then program? So those are, I think you always have to start from the sport and then kind of work your way back from there. And if you fail to do that, then you're just essentially applying your own biases on something that you know nothing about, which I definitely did in the beginning. And now I'm trying to, change that and be a lot more flexible when it comes to that, and really always starting with the end goal in mind.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I